Hello and welcome to Knife Delights. It's time for another Two for Tuesday, and I've got a pair of Buck traditional hunting knives here. On the left, we have the 118 Personal, and on the right, we have the 116 Caper. Now, the reason I put these two knives together is, well, they've got a history together, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. I've been doing, I do a lot of studying on the Buck knives history, and it gets quite confusing and quite complicated at times. And I have to keep rereading it and trying to sort through all the different details. So I just want to caution everybody here today. I'm going to talk in some generalities. There you go. You got it out, Tom. You got the word out. Anyway, I don't want to get too specific because I'm afraid that I'd give out some wrong information if I'm not understanding things correctly. And that's the way it goes in history. Sometimes you got to study it and study it. Every time I break these knives out and do a video on them, I seem to pick up a little more understanding on the history of the particular model. And so while I've reviewed these knives before, I got a little different take on it because I know in one video when I was talking about the 116 Caper that it looked like it had the same handle as the 118. And come to find out, that is true. So the 118 Personal was part of the original set of fixed blade knives that started in the 1961 factory production. Now, what exactly does 61 factory production mean? I am not quite sure. Because when you go prior to 61 and you're looking in catalogs, you see some of the fixed blades, they have names to them. But back in like one of the 40s or 50s catalog, it talks about the Personal, but it seemed to have like a really wide Skinner blade on it. The handle materials have changed. Early Buck knives had lucite material. As a matter of fact, Hoyt Buck, the founder, when he first started making knives, he was using like old files and that, and they found a source for scrap lucite, and that's why they would use lucite. It's also kind of called bakelite material. Anyway, he would use those scraps to make his handle material, and he'd get aluminum from old aircraft, airframes and that. So I guess he was a recycler in his day before it became popular. But these models have evolved. But what I learned was the Caper knife here came out in 62 or 63. And they said quite literally they would take the 118 Personal and they would grind the blade down to make it a 116. Now, this one here is from like this Caper knife. You can see the tang stamp is upside down on it. It is a 3-line. I believe this one was made anywhere between 1972 and 1986. And this is a more recent one. I think it was, I didn't check my list, but I think this is like 2018, something like that. But you can see the difference in the handles there. You see how this is really flat right there, kind of more of a 90-degree angle. And on here, it's more of a ramp. They both have a single micarta spacer up here at the top and at the bottom. And it looks to me like the thickness, or this little swell here, it looks like it's a little more pronounced here on this modern Personal, making it just a little bit wider. It's hard to tell. It's very close. And there's a look at the pommels there. Earlier pommels on some of these fixed blade knives, they were a little bit wider and a little more square. But the 118 Personal then, if it entered factory production in this shape and this handle material, if it began in 61, and I believe they stopped production of these just a couple years ago. So these are no longer in production. So I'm glad I was able to pick one up, you know, while they still were in production and not having to go to the secondary market to try to find one. On the caper, interesting story on that, and I don't want to fail to mention, I bought this knife in an antique store and it came in a buck sheath, but it was the wrong buck sheath. And this is when I first started becoming friends with John there at J.O. Ventures, and he was starting to show some of his leather work back and forth in his videos. And I shot him an email and said, hey, do you mind making me a sheath for this? And a sheath he made indeed. There it is, this beautiful Scout Carry side draw sheath. So here is a look at one of his early products. And he kept telling me he wasn't sure how good it looked, and you know, he's still learning and practicing. And well, look at, folks, this is very thick leather. It's a fine sheath, and it just fits in there very nice and tight. So we did kind of a video collaboration on the review of this, and then he made the sheath for it. So that's how I really got to be good friends with John there. And our friendship has just grown from there. Now on the modern knives here, these are the sheaths here. They got the wraparound snap on them. They do have a plastic liner down inside to help keep the form. Now I had a viewer tell me the other day that he takes those plastic liners out and he's taken a piece of leather and folded around to put down in there. He didn't like the plastic. So that's a nice modification for the sheath. Of course, the sheath does have a drain hole in it there. Yep. And of course, their sheaths always have the model number stamped on the back of it. Well, I got to tell you, it is so fascinating to be able to learn about these knives and learn about buck history. Again, there's just so much to learn. I can't process it all sometimes. Oh, back to handle material. The early models, as I said, they used lucite, but they also started using a white plastic material, and it wasn't phenolic like this is, the black phenolic, but it was some other type of white plastic material. So there are some white-handled knives of this era out there. They're very hard to find. Buck actually stopped using that because they found out that in extreme cold weather conditions and that the plastic might crack on it. So they are truly hard to find collector's item. Now that I know this, I'll be on the lookout for one of those with the white handle material on them. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. I've rambled enough here. I hope you've enjoyed this 2 for Tuesday. I'll remind everybody I have a Buck Knives playlist. It includes overviews of my entire buck knife collection, the slip joints, the traditional and the non-traditional hunting knives. So if you're into buck knives, why, make sure and check out that playlist. And as always, until next time, have a very delightful day.